welcome to another episode of Thingamajigs, an exciting history of a mundane thing. I am Ben.
And I am Danielle.
Happy Mother's Day.
Oh yeah, today is Mother's Day.
If you're listening to this near Mother's Day. If not, then I take it back.
I think everyone at least knows a mother. Like, you might not be a mother, you might not have a mother, but you know someone who's got one.
Statistically, most people on Earth were born to a mother.
Uh-huh.
So there's that.
You know what mom's like.
Well-behaved children.
And you know what usually does not produce well-behaved children. It's also like your favorite thing.
Bad parenting?
No.
It's up there for me. It's a good one.
Sugar.
Um...
Not that sugar makes wild, unruly children, but sometimes sugar has a weird reaction in the little darlings' bodies that isn't always favorable.
Obesity.
No, just like they get sugar highs. And actually, some parents don't mind so much the sugar, how the sugar makes their children act. But they avoid red dyes like the plague. Some children have extremely wild reactions behaviorally to red dyes.
Interesting.
Sweetness has a very long history. This might be our most controversial episode yet. Some pretty heinous things have been literally sugar-coated, from lying to slavery and all kinds of despicable things in between. Notice earlier I used the word sweetness. And that is because there was a time before sugar, and all we had was honey.
Say it ain't so.
That's not to say that honey was the only sweet thing we had, because we had fruit. It wasn't anything like the fruit we have today, but it was kind of sweet. Have you ever looked into like ancient fruit?
Oh, yes.
They would look at the fruit that we have now and not even recognize it.
Yeah, fruit had a major glow up.
Yeah, it did. We were like, this is sweet. How do we make this better and bigger?
We did a lot of breeding of fruits to get the delicious, big, juicy fruitums that we have today.
Yeah, we've briefly talked about apples and how crazy it is that we even have delicious apples now.
For more on that, listen to the episode on apple cider.
But honey has always been sweet. And it was an easy product to add to other things in order to sweeten them.
The only downside is bees.
We have been keeping bees possibly as long as like 10,000 years. So we've been well aware of honey for a long time.
Bees are scary.
And bees. Bees are scary.
I love them, but they're so scary.
They are the only flying, stinging thing that I don't immediately despise, because bees are important.
Humanity is in a toxic relationship with bees. They love us, we love them, but at any second they could turn around and start stabbing us.
And kill some people.
Very toxic.
Sugar entered human life in the form of sugar cane at about 8,000 BC from Papua New Guinea.
Papua New Guinea.
Papua New Guinea. It's a very fun place to say. Like Nantucket. I'm waiting for the day that Nantucket makes an appearance on the show, because I just love saying it.
Does this count as an appearance? Oh.
No, not really.
Okay.
I read a quote. I don't remember whom from. I think it was someone that had to do with Alexander the Great, but it said, "The reed which gives honey without bees." So that is how closely we associated sweet with bees. From there, it went to India. There was not a lot written about its manufacturing process in the early days, but in 500 BC, some Indian writing did refer to sugarcane being boiled into this pulpy mess. There are also some Chinese writings from 800 BC crediting India for being the birthplace of sugar, which is a refreshing change. Finally, someone else getting to invent something.
Wasn't China, wasn't the ancient Egyptians? India.
Yep.
That's a win.
Thank you, India. Or maybe, I don't know, it gets complicated. And I guess they didn't really invent it, they refined it, but still. In fact, China took a very long time to figure out how to refine sugar. The emperor eventually sent people to India in 640 AD to learn how to do it. It is an incredibly complicated process.
Is it?
Yes.
We used to go, as I mentioned previously in an episode, we used to go tour the plantation homes in southern Louisiana, and they had some sugar fields, and you could just grab a piece of sugar cane and chew on it, and it was very sweet.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, it seems like all you gotta do is just mash it and get that sugar juice out of there.
That's part of it. And really, okay, so getting sugar crystals, getting raw sugar, is not a terribly complicated process. But getting refined white sugar, oh my gosh, you have to, there's recipes of boiling it in, the better version is egg whites. And then the worst version is ox blood. You needed protein, the protein in the egg and the protein in the ox blood. Somehow, chemistry, I don't know. It was very complicated. Someone who knows about these things could probably explain it in layman's terms. But see, I am a layman, so therefore, I cannot.
You want your sugar bloody or eggy?
I'll just take the raw sugar, you know?
I guess that's fine. Don't they charge more for raw sugar? What kind of scam is that?
Do they?
I think they do.
In ye olden times, they did not charge more for raw sugar.
I shouldn't think that they would.
Now, like, raw sugar was cheaper, and then refined white sugar was more expensive. Also, getting those crystals to be really fine was desirable.
According to my very surface level research just now, raw cane sugar is anywhere from 2 to 4 times more expensive than refined sugar now.
That's that all-natural green tax.
Yeah, that appeal to nature fallacy that you get to charge a little extra for.
This is healthy because ancient Native Americans did it. Sugar made its way into Arabia, and this led to Europe finding it because of the Crusades in 1095. There was a lot of traveling for that event, and people brought it back to their homelands, and Europeans just loved this stuff. But they had a problem with most of their land being too cool and dry, not ideal conditions for growing sugarcane, which meant that they had to import it, which also meant that it was going to be more expensive. Henry III got his first taste of sugar and thought it was worth spending $450 of today dollars for 3 pounds of sugar.
It's only about 200 times more expensive than it would cost today.
Now, there is a history of sugar being used medicinally, but I mean, I feel like we don't need to get into that. If you're wondering, no, sugar is not a medicine. I guess if you're starving and you need quick energy, then some sugar water might be considered medicine for you in that extremely specific moment. Or if you're a tired little bee or butterfly.
Or hummingbird. They like sugar.
Or if you're a tired little hummingbird. Anyway, it led to apothecaries selling it, which I find funny.
Sugar, not medicine. Devastating breakthrough in scientific discovery.
Both sugar and soft drinks started out in their time frames, apothecaries or drugstores or whatever you wanted to call it.
And cocaine. We're just taking loss after loss.
Christopher Columbus.
I know him.
You know, we've been doing this podcast for a while now. Like, I think we just made a year, and we have managed to, or at least I'm pretty sure we have never mentioned Christopher Columbus. But better or worse, here we go. I don't think we're going to get into any details about him, so it should be fine. He was, as you know, an explorer and traveled to the Americas in 1492.
Correction, he sailed the ocean blue.
Correct, in 1492. He realized that the West Indies was the perfect environment for sugarcane to grow, and you know, I said we wouldn't get into any of his sordid past, but it's hard to talk about Columbus and especially talk about sugar and not get into unpleasant things. So this is the part of the show that you strap in for unpleasant history. Humans have a lot of it. Let's talk about the transatlantic slave trade. That's where it all started. It was called the Triangle Trade, which is a bit of a oversimplification, but that is kind of how this podcast rolls. We don't get into the nitty-gritty details of everything. If you want that, you'll have to find an expert. And you probably won't get the occasional laugh like you do here. So.
It's a service we provide. You're welcome.
There was this triangle of shipping that went from Europe to Africa to the Americas, over and over. It was an endless loop of taking goods like copper, cloth, guns, stuff like that, to Africa, where they dropped that load off and picked up enslaved people, and then sailed to the Americas, where they dropped off the slaves and picked up things like sugar and tobacco. And then they took those things back to Europe, where the triangle started over again. The people that were enslaved were usually prisoners of war. It was kind of a perfect storm. There happened to be a lot of war going on between West and Central Africans at this particular moment in time, and that led to people being captured because you won the war, and now you have all these POWs. What are you going to do with them? Keeping them is expensive because you have to, feed them and at least put a board or something over their head. Not to mention all the manpower it takes to keep another person prisoner. You couldn't just let them go because then what was the point of winning that battle? They're just going to go and regroup. And that leaves killing them. And why would you kill them when the Europeans are like, I will take those off your hands. And look at all of these wonderful modern things I have. All these goods. You could have them too if you just sell me your African brothers. And then they said, yeah, actually, I think I'll do that. I like copper and guns. What I think is really interesting about where these slaves came from is they weren't just poor people of different African empires. Because I always thought that slaves were the less privileged people of Africa, and I don't just mean like monetarily, I mean socially. These were the people that didn't have strong family systems. No one had their back. They got pushed around by the people above them that had more money or power or whatever, but that was so incredibly not the case. Because these were people who had strong communities, well-educated people that were established in their empires. I mean, royalty in some cases. And they were just almost at a flip of a coin, or how fickle fate is with which side wins a war. I've heard stories of how different battles in World War II was fought and they only won because they didn't have as rich of a dinner the night before a strenuous sea journey battle, so they didn't get seasick, and that made them better soldiers than the other guys, or the weather was bad that day. So we lost because we happened to be standing in the wind and couldn't see because the rain kept getting in their eyes. Stuff like that. It eventually got worse, though. People realized how profitable it was to sell slaves, so they started kidnapping people and selling them, which is still so random and uncontrollable. I mean, one day you're going down the street walking your, 16th century dog, and boom, gone, swept up. Before you know it, you're on a boat.
It's a bummer.
I know.
I would not personally enjoy that. I'm going to come out and say it.
Oh, you're so strong.
I'm going to be brave and say it. I don't like that.
We're going to take a very brave stance here and say that we're against slavery. Come at me, bro. Which we make light about that now, but in the time frame that we're talking about, it was a brave thing to come out and say that you were against slavery.
I do still feel like it's a brave statement whenever I come out against slave labor, but, people are still using Temu, so. But that's a topic for a different episode.
This was an unimaginably hard journey for these people. Like 15 to 25% of them didn't even survive the boat. Oh, and did I tell you how many? 12 million. 12 million people were shipped to the Americas in these horrible trifecta of economy. Which means that 2 million didn't make it all the way across the 3-month journey.
Those are bad numbers.
Just to give some perspective of how massive this migration of enslaved people was, that is double the 6 million Jews that died in the Holocaust. And it's not like once they got off the boat, it was over and everything was peachy. They survived only to be forced to work on these sugar plantations. There were other plantations too, but most of the slaves that were taken were sent to sugar plantations because refining sugar was a very labor-intensive job. Not only did you have to plant and harvest sugarcane, but you had to then turn it into something people wanted. On top of that, once you cut the sugarcane, you were on a clock to get it pressed and processed. you only had like 2 days before it spoiled. They had these giant upright rollers that they fed the cane through to be pressed so all the juice would run out, and there was no OSHA watching out for the safety of these workers. So if you got a hand caught in these rollers, the only way to keep you from being pulled in and crushed to death was to keep a machete nearby, and you lost that hand or elbow, depending on how long it took someone to, quote, save you. And if you weren't doing that job, then you might find yourself at the boiling vats of the cane juice because they had to evaporate all the water out of it. And if you've ever worked with caramel, you know how much that hurts when it splatters on you. It sticks to you and just continues to boil. Just to give an even better idea of how terribly hard this work was on the body, the average lifespan once they arrived was 7 to 9 years. And a lot of these accidents happened because of how pressured they were to move quickly. We've got to get this processed before it spoils. If you get a digit caught in these rollers, we're not stopping them. Also, it was very difficult to stop them. A lot of the time it was being powered by like animals or people or even like wind. In a relatively short period of time, there were well over 300 sugar plantations in Brazil. And eventually it crept up into the US, where Louisiana became the largest producer of sugar in the United States. Which, wow, what a thing to be known for. Good job, Louisiana. Also, the sugar from Louisiana was considered to be inferior compared to the sugar made in the Caribbean. So, like, why did we even bother? It had to do with the Caribbean being a better environment for sugarcane to grow. Louisiana is only occasionally tropical, but it does get hot and humid enough to grow pretty good sugarcane. All of this labor and shipping was one reason why sugar was so expensive, especially in the beginning. We didn't have a lot of it. It was very expensive. One way to show how incredibly wealthy you were was to have massive, like 6-foot sugar statues created.
Sugar statues?
Sugar statues. Kind of like ice statues.
I imagine it had a similar shelf life to ice sculptures.
You know, I didn't look in to see how long they lasted.
Sugar not very shelf stable.
I don't know. Have you seen those? There's this lady who made an American flag out of Peeps, and it's been on her wall for like a year.
I don't know
and the
about
Peeps are very hard, but they are there.
Peeps are I don't know what Peeps are made out of.
Marshmallow.
But no, definitely not. Peeps are made from some foreign substance that the rest of Earth has yet to discover.
So as the industry grew, everyone got more efficient and more slaves were added, more sugar was produced, and the price of sugar gradually came down. Which meant that sugar was moving away from being a luxury item into being a staple, and that really changed the economic mindset of sugar. No longer was this something rare and delicious. It was, well, everybody has sugar. We have to have sugar. More people having access to sugar meant more people were interested in other products that paired well with sugar, like teas or coffees, jams, stuff like that. And all of these things are having record sales because sugar is more affordable. A lot of people either didn't know where it was coming from or how it was being produced, or they didn't want to know. If I had to guess, a good portion of them didn't know, and the other portion of them like heard whispers and probably didn't want to believe it.
Like Timu.
Right. I don't think that a large portion of the population understand what's
allowing them to get cheap clothes all the time.
Uh-huh. Especially like younger people. I mean, I have a niece who absolutely loves Shein. She doesn't. She's not buying those things because she is aware of what's going on and doesn't care. She's buying the things because she's 14 and it's cheap and it's pretty and she wants to wear it for a year and then throw it away because that's what those products are for.
A year is generous, but yes.
Or they made excuses. They knew the mortality rate on these plantations was high, but they chose to believe that it wasn't the slavery or the claimed abuse. It was because it was a new world, a frontier lifestyle. There was a lot of disease and it was a harsh environment. And I mean, it was a harsh environment. We're talking about the tropics. But they knew. They knew. These people were being tortured. I think that's going to be our new tagline in this podcast is, they knew. Another huge issue is that it was cheaper to just replace a slave than it was to maintain one, so that person lived a longer, healthier life. Did I mention that sugar plantations were the worst? Like, sugar plantations is where they sent new slaves to be broken. They would work 18 hours a day, very little sleep, tropical sun. Could you imagine working 18 hours a day every day? I've worked 10 hours a day, 4 days, and I was grumpy. And that's not even a hard schedule.
I can imagine it. I had a schedule similar to that for a couple of weeks, and
you were mentally different after that. I can attest to that.
Yeah, it's definitely how you break someone.
Some of them would get sold again after that. I guess it would be an upgrade for the person that was enslaved, I guess. I mean, you aren't on the worst plantation anymore. But people who worked on sugar plantations that were sold up were advertised as seasoned, which meant they worked in sugar mills and knew how to be good slaves. But there was a group of people who today would be considered like woke liberals, but back then they were just a group of religious people who were very proud of their simple, plain lives. They were vehemently against slavery. They were the Society of Friends, or as we know them, the Quakers. Now, not all Quakers shared this passion. Some of them did own slaves and participated in, well, what I mean by that is like purchased products without worrying about where it came from or how it was produced. But that was kind of earlier Quakers. As time went on, they all kind of came to the realization that they didn't want to be a part of that. But for the earlier ones that already owned slaves, they were left in a very weird situation where they didn't want to own slaves anymore. But it wasn't as simple as just letting them go, because they would have just been seized and resold, most likely to worse people under worse conditions. It was illegal to just free your slaves. There were instances where slaves could be legally freed, but it involved doing like outstanding service to the state. One of the examples I saw was serving in the American Revolution. But British Quakers is where the large-scale campaigning against slavery was started, with anti-slavery organizations, and one of the most effective ways of reaching people with information at the time was circulates. I don't know if that's exactly the right word, but they were pamphlets with the truth of where your sugar and cotton and other slave-made products came from. James Phillips was a famous Quaker publisher who told the truth about the abhorrent conditions that these people were forced to live and work in. He had this one image that was very moving. It really communicated the intensity of the situation and grabbed the viewer's attention. It was of a ship, and it showed how many people could legally be carried as cargo. And of course, they're stacked in there at a density that is unimaginable. The drawings kind of look like when tents tell you how many people can fit in this tent they're trying to sell you, and you look at the graph and it's like 10 people laying head to foot with every inch of the bottom of that tent covered in flesh. We look at that and know immediately it might say it sleeps 10, but there is no way anyone would want to be in that tent if there are 10 people trying to sleep in it. I think it was the first mass request for boycotting. They would tell people that if they bought this sugar, they were eating the blood of another human being, and they were just as responsible for the atrocities as the masters and traders were. And it really hit people. This did not sit well with them. They were successful in 1807. Well, partially successful. That's when they abolished the slave trade, which meant that there wouldn't be any new people enslaved and shipped, but it didn't do anything for the people who were already on plantations. That didn't come to an end until 1833, when the British Empire made the ownership of people illegal. Now, that was only the British, so once the Quakers won that battle, they started advocating in other parts of the world. Slavery ended in the United States in 1865 with the close of the Civil War, and with the 13th Amendment, which says, Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Abraham Lincoln ensured its passage through Congress by adding it to the Republican Party platform during the upcoming presidential election, and it passed with a vote of 119 to 56. That except under punishment of crime bit is a little controversial, but I don't think we need to get into that. It doesn't have anything to do with sugar. I just wanted to acknowledge that it is something that is still up for debate currently. So once slavery was abolished, the price of sugar did go up. We all expected that. Some people were already paying more for sugar because they were buying sugar from East India, so they could put it in their fancy little sugar bowls that said, East India sugar not made by slaves. And it said that on the dish. People were serious about advertising how they felt regarding this topic. Everyone knew what was going on, and it was impossible to just stay ignorant about it. Once you knew, you had to choose a side, and that is one reason why the Civil War was so brutal. People within the same family might have different opinions, and there was a hard line in the sand. Now, cane sugar wasn't the only form of sugar. We also had beet sugar, which was more expensive to produce, but it had a huge advantage that it could be grown and produced in colder climates. A lot of Europe falls into that cooler climate box, and sugarcane could only be grown in more tropical places that had a lot of water and even more heat. And Europe finally has an opportunity to grow and manufacture its own sugar. Hopefully they learned from the misdeeds of others and produced their beet sugar a little more ethically. In Germany in 1747, Andreas Marggraf experimented with making sugar from beets, and the first factory was built in 1802. Now, Napoleon was very interested in this because France was cut off from cane sugar. There was a British blockade. Napoleon is a controversial guy. He caused all kinds of trouble. But he did help establish 40 beet sugar factories in France. It kind of collapsed with the fall of Napoleon, but it bounced back. And it was a big hit all throughout Europe, and still almost all of the sugar produced in the European Union is beet sugar.
Huh.
It's because it's a great environment for it. They can't grow cane. Sugar today is still kind of a huge problem. Not in the same way. And I say problem. It is a problem in the sense that it's not considered something that our body needs, per se. Like, we don't need added sugars for our bodies to function properly. But it is added to nearly everything we eat, especially if you consume mainly like processed foods.
Are you telling me they're adding extra sugar to my zebra cakes?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh my goodness.
I'm pretty sure zebra cakes is nothing but added sugar.
Little Debbie, what have you done?
So that's not to say that we don't need naturally occurring sugar. It's a great source of energy. There are a lot of other nutrients that come along with foods that have naturally occurring sugars. We just don't need added sugars. And unless you're mainly eating home-cooked meals that you're making from scratch and not adding things like processed sauces or anything that you didn't make yourself and know every ingredient that you added, you are consuming added sugars. It's in everything. The average person in the United States consumes 17 teaspoons of sugar a day, which definitely exceeds recommended limits.
I probably got him beat.
You probably do. You eat more sweets than anybody that I know. My dad eats a lot of sweets. You might be ahead of him just a little bit. So added sugar just refers to any sugar that you are consuming that is not occurring naturally in whatever you're eating. Why is there added sugar in my can of peaches when peaches already have naturally occurring sugars?
Because sugar
is addictive
and delicious.
Sugary drinks are the main source of consumed added sugars in the U.S. This obviously includes soft drinks, but it also includes sports drinks, fruit drinks, juices, coffees, teas. And again, if you aren't making that coffee and tea at home and you know how much sugar is going into it, or maybe you don't even add sugar to your tea at home, that makes a huge difference.
That is a huge amount of sugar. Soft drinks are basically 100% sugar. the like Starbucks coffees that you get from the fridge at the gas station or whatever.
So much sugar.
All sugar.
You think you're getting a caffeine high, but you're actually getting a sugar high.
Pretty much. And sports drinks have way more sugar than people realize because electrolytes do not taste good. They taste like pee. And the only way to make your Gatorade not taste like pee is to bury that flavor in sugar. And that's exactly what they do.
So there's a lot of health risks associated with especially added sugars because it's just more sugar. Now this is potentially causing. I'm not saying that everyone who consumes too much sugar is going to get these things, but it is risks you should know about. I have a list. Diabetes, heart disease, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, kidney disease, liver disease. It can increase your risk of dementia, tooth decay, overall inflammation. My mom talks about her joints hurting, like when she is on a diet where she's watching what she's eating, she feels better, and then after like the holidays or something like that, when she's consuming more sugar, her joints hurt. And then the last one is obesity.
I should probably eat less sugar.
Yup.
I'm gonna wait until I'm 35. Everything goes downhill after you're 35. That's the cutoff. You have to live healthy after that.
Now, the cancer bit is pretty scary, but from what I understand, and disclaimer, I am not a doctor. I feel like I've said that so many times on this show. It's more like if you already have cancer, sugar makes it worse. So cancer cells love consuming sugar and can make the cancer more aggressive.
And as I previously mentioned, sugar is not good for your immune system. So if you have anything, sugar's basically going to make it worse.
But it's so delicious. Just consume your sugars through fruits and stuff. I mean, have you had a banana? That is a sweet fruit.
Or peaches.
We like to take a banana and mash it and put it with peanut butter, and that's like a dessert. And sometimes it's just breakfast. Don't even get me started on sugar and breakfast.
All American breakfasts are dessert.
Which I feel like I've been told that starting your day with sugar is really, really bad for you.
Probably. Sounds bad for you.
It puts you on this high and then you drop really fast.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I remember people would say that kids who have a sugary breakfast are much more tired and paying less attention in school as the day goes on. That was something they always used to say.
So you might be asking yourself, how much sugar can I eat?
1 pack of Oreos a day.
Because obviously I'm going to keep consuming sugar. And I don't think you should cut all sugar from your diet. Sugar is yummy and it makes your brain happy. We should be eating things that make us happy sometimes.
Sometimes.
We just need to be responsible about it. First, let's talk about what discretionary calories are. Those are calories that are left over once you have met your daily nutritional needs. The American Heart Association has different recommendations for men and women, and soon there's also one for children. Men should consume no more than 150 discretionary calories of sugar per day, which comes out to be about 9 teaspoons of sugar.
That's a good bit.
And women should consume no more than 100 discretionary calories of sugar per day, which comes out to be about 6 teaspoons of sugar. And women and children are the same, so AHA gave a window of 2 to 18 years of age, which I mean, and if you're an 18-year-old male, I don't think you should worry too much about waiting for your 19th birthday to add that extra 3 teaspoons of sugar. In cases like these, age is somewhat of a construct. But yeah, so your children shouldn't be consuming any more than 6 teaspoons of sugar on top of their nutritional needs.
Good to know.
The dose makes the poison. Sugar isn't necessarily bad for you. Too much sugar is really bad for you. I have some fun facts.
Every fact about sugar is fun except for literally all of the ones that we've said so far.
Did you know that lactose is a kind of sugar?
I did know that.
I knew that milk has sugar, but I didn't know it was lactose. Like, I didn't put those two things together.
I've had suspicions that I'm mildly lactose intolerant, so I know a lot about lactose.
We go through these periods of time where we only buy almond milk, and then you decide, because almond milk is not that good, we switch to Lactaid, and then we buy Lactaid for months, and then you're like, you know what, you can just buy regular milk, and then we start buying regular milk, and then you start getting an upset tummy, and so we go back to the almond milk and make our way back to Lactaid, eventually to regular milk, and it's an endless cycle.
Part of the problem why that's so complicated with the almond milk and the Lactaid is because I like cereal so much, and I go through these phases where I eat a lot of cereal and then I eat a lot less cereal, and almond milk just is not good with cereal.
Almond milk lacks the happiness, the stomach hug that milk has. I'm not a huge fan of Lactaid because it is sweeter. It tastes sweeter than regular milk. Ben swears he can't taste it, but I can.
I don't notice a difference. To me, Lactaid is identical to regular milk, and I love that.
I think it's because you don't drink milk. Like, you don't drink milk out of a glass like I do.
I don't.
Eat it in your cereal, and your cereal's already sweet.
But other than cereal, almond milk is great for lots of things. And if you like almond milk, then that's great, and I'm happy for you.
About 75% of packaged food contains added sugars. And there are a lot of packaged foods out there that you would not imagine had added. Why does this have sugar?
Little Debbie, why? Why do my zebra cakes have sugar?
I want to say the Big Mac had added sugars.
Sounds right. Yeah. There's, oh my gosh, barbecue sauce.
Oh my gosh. Any sauces. Ketchup.
People don't realize how much sugar is in ketchup and barbecue sauce. It's an astounding amount. It's like mostly sugar.
There's a lot of ketchup in a lot of store-bought salsas as well. So read the back of your packages. See if you find any added sugars in places that you didn't expect it.
It's listed on the nutrition info panel.
Adolf Hitler was an absolute sugar addict. He would fill whole teacups with sugar cubes and then pour the hot tea over it to melt his sugar sludge.
Pretty gross. I like that we're hitting slavery and Hitler in the same episode.
Hey, you told me that we needed more controversial episodes so that it was more interesting.
Too sad.
It's not even controversial at this point. It's just depressing. He ate excessive amounts of pralines all of the time.
Oh, love pralines.
He dumped sugar in his wine.
Wine is already sugar.
I know, but it's not sweet.
Man. Don't recommend putting sugar in your wine.
Supposedly, Hitler once said that, for me, sweets are the best food for the nerves. And this is all kind of funny because he was so scared of cancer. His mom died of cancer. He also was on a lot of drugs. I guess that's why he switched to vegetarian towards the end. Honey doesn't spoil.
I knew this one.
It will crystallize, but you just have to heat it up. And it's fine. Honey also does this weird thing. If it's real honey and you put it in a plate and you swish it underwater in a circular fashion, the honey, it'll turn into a honeycomb shape.
Will it?
Yeah, and if it is not real honey, if it's synthetic honey, it doesn't do that.
I have never heard about this. I think you're lying.
I'm not lying. I've done it. It's fun. I'll show it to you. When sugar was first introduced, it was classified as a spice instead of a sweetener, which I thought was a fun classification.
Funny. Now we see sugar as the opposite of spice.
Yeah. It's funny though because sugar and salt are undistinguishable with the eye, but one is definitely considered a spice and one is considered a sweetener. We've all done it. April Fool's Day, switching the sugar with the salt. I did that for April Fool's Day, and it happened to be a day that my parents had workers come out to do building work on our house, and they were like, oh, let's all have some coffee. And Danielle thought that it would be a fun joke when it was just her dad, but whenever she found out that it was a whole work crew of people that we didn't know very well, I quickly ran back inside and switched it back, because that would not have been a funny joke and I would have been in a lot of trouble. Sugar is used as a preservative. I think that's one reason why there is so much of it in the bread we buy from the store. I know, I was always under the impression that when something had sugar in it, it would spoil faster. Like if you have sweet tea and unsweet tea, that sweet tea is going to spoil way faster than the unsweet tea, because unsweet tea is just water and leaves. Who knows? Maybe that's just big sugar telling us that sugar is a preservative. And it's a lie! Lemons technically have more sugar in them than strawberries.
Is that so? Strawberries do get pretty sour.
Sugar was commonly called white gold for reasons we talked about. It was so incredibly expensive.
Now we call white gold white gold.
And purple gold.
And white gold, fun fact, not white. It's actually silver.
The average person eats 61 pounds of refined sugar in 1 year.
I probably got him beat. Nobody's beating my high score.
So consuming too much sugar can lead to collagen damage, which means wrinkles. I'm not sure about that one, but we seem to think it's true. I'd like to ask a dermatologist about that.
Yeah, I'm not very wrinkly. I got sweet little baby skin.
You're a young man.
I always look at my hands when I'm driving. I'm like, why do my hands look like little kid hands?
I have never thought that.
But they just proportionally don't look like man hands.
Could you imagine your hands on a kid? It would swim so good.
Mr. Future Michael Phelps.
That's it. That's all I got.
This has been Thingamajigs and another exciting history of a mundane thing. I want to hear from you. Not really related to sugar. Is lactate sweeter than milk? Thoughts on almond milk? What do you do with it?
Should we be eating almonds?
Should we be eating almonds?
It takes a lot of water to produce almonds.
Let us know under the video on YouTube or in the Q&A section on Spotify, or send us an email. But other than that, don't forget to grab a goose instead of that Twinkie.
Which is kind of weird considering why we started saying grab a goose.
Well, that's all Twinkies are good for anyway. Thanks for listening.
Forgive me by you.